The war between the Galatian Empire and the Federation of Free Planets have raged for decades. Yet, in the endless expanse of space, a single truth remained: humanity was relentless. Their drive, their ingenuity, their will to survive it was unmatched. On the battlefield, the humans fought like beasts, tearing through enemy ranks with unyielding ferocity. The Galatian Empire, advanced and vast, had underestimated humanity's capacity for tenacity. In the heat of combat, they found themselves facing a foe unlike any they had encountered before. Humans didn't break, they adapted, fought back, and persevered in ways that defied expectation. The war had dragged on, the Galaxians losing more ground, until finally, the Federation's fleet overwhelmed their defensive perimeter. After years of battles, the Galatian High Command decided to initiate an unthinkable strategy: take no prisoners. They would show humanity that, no matter how hard they fought, they would never be given mercy. Their fleet entered the Federation's homeworld, Earth, with orders to obliterate any remaining human resistance. When the first wave of their assault landed on the surface, the humans fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were crude by Galatian standards, but they were effective, each soldier fighting like it was their last day. The Galaxians, confident in their advanced weaponry and technology, quickly overwhelmed the humans. Thousands of prisoners were taken. The soldiers were shackled, beaten, and thrown into detention cells aboard the enemy warships. It was meant to be a final humiliation for humanity. The Galaxians were sure their victory was near. But then something happened that the Galatian generals never saw coming. The prisoners, although broken in body, were not broken in spirit. They were human, after all. One by one, they began to resist. They sabotaged their captors' systems, gathered information, and whispered among themselves. They didn't just wait for the end, they planned. The Galaxians thought their prisoners would crumble under the pressure, that the humans would be docile and meek in the face of certain death. They were wrong. On the cold, steel walls of their ships, the humans sparked an uprising. What the Galaxians hadn't realized was the power of human will. Their species had a fire that could not be extinguished. Even in the darkest corners of a prison cell, they found hope. They forged alliances, shared knowledge, and worked together like a machine built for survival. Within days, their shackles were broken, their weapons reclaimed, and a new war began. The Galatian Empire had made a fatal mistake. They underestimated humanity's ability to rise from the ashes. When the Federation fleet arrived to liberate their captured brethren, the Galaxians saw firsthand what they had unleashed. They were met with a fully armed and organized resistance, not the broken husks they had expected. The Federation's forces, now bolstered by an army of human foes who had turned the tide, clashed with the Galaxians in a series of fierce engagements. The Galaxians' overconfidence in their cruelty proved to be their downfall. The prisoners, no longer prisoners, fought with the knowledge that every victory was a step closer to ending the war once and for all. In the final battle, as the Galatian flagship fell to human bombs, the last of the Galatian leaders realized their mistake. They had thought they could defeat humanity by destroying their bodies, by stripping away their dignity, but they had failed to grasp the one truth about humanity: they could never break the human spirit. The Federation of Free Planets stood victorious, not just because of superior technology or strategy, but because humanity had proven that they could not be defeated not by force, not by cruelty, and certainly not by fear. And the Galatian Empire, it was no more. In the end, the humans made sure the story of the war was remembered by how they were able to survive, their strength in unity, and the mistake that cost the Galaxians everything. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. The Federation's victory was swift and decisive, but the scars of the war remained. As the last remnants of the Galatian fleet drifted into the void, the surviving humans began a long process of rebuilding. The humans, though battered, stood proud. The enemy had underestimated them, and in doing so, they had given humanity an enduring legacy of resilience. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, a somber realization began to settle over the leaders of the Federation. The Galaxians had made a grave mistake that would echo throughout the galaxy. The human spirit could not be contained, but the trauma of war, particularly the treatment of foes, ran deep. Humanity had not only defeated a foe, but had learned the cost of their own survival. Each freed prisoner now carried a new burden. They were not just survivors of a war, they were symbols of the cruelty they had endured. Captain Alara Hayes, one of the leading officers in the Federation's fleet, had fought on the front lines of the conflict, and she had witnessed the brutal conditions the Poes had endured. She had personally led the rescue missions, freeing hundreds from the clutches of the Galaxians. But as the dust settled, she found herself troubled by a question: what would humanity do with its newfound power? In the aftermath of the war, an unexpected voice arose among the surviving leaders, a group of former prisoners, those who had fought in the uprising against their Galatian captors, began to push for a radical change in the Federation's policies. They were no longer interested in simply rebuilding. Their worldview were focused on ensuring that no one, not even their enemies, would suffer the way they had. "We must prevent another war like this," Commander Darius Holt, a former POW who had helped lead the rebellion aboard a Galatian prison ship, declared in a public speech to the Federation's Council. "We cannot stoop to the level of our enemies. Not in victory. We must ensure that the atrocities committed against us are never repeated." Darius' words resonated with many, but they also raised concerns among those who believed that the Federation's security was paramount. Some argued that there were still hostile forces in the galaxy, and that humanity's newfound power could not be squandered by kindness. It was a dangerous sentiment idea that mercy could lead to another war. Alara, though sympathetic to Darius' cause, knew the galaxy was a far more complex place. Humanity had survived the war, but it had also become a beacon of strength, and with that strength came responsibility. She had seen firsthand the horrors that could be wrought by unchecked power. The Federation was at a crossroads. Would they allow the same ruthless cycle of war to continue, or would they set a new precedent for how power should be wielded in the galaxy? Would they repeat the mistakes of their enemies, or would they find a way to rise above it all? It was Alara's voice that ultimately shifted the tide. As a leader who had seen the horrors of war, but also the spirit that humanity possessed, she stood before the Federation's Council, her voice calm but resolute. "We cannot afford to be like the Galaxians. They killed prisoners because they believed it would break us," she said. But what they didn't understand is that the human spirit cannot be killed. The mistake they made was thinking that death could conquer us. We are more than that. We are survivors, and it's time we showed the galaxy that we are not just conquerors, but caretakers of life. Her words were powerful enough to sway the Council. A new law was established, one that would ensure the humane treatment of all prisoners, regardless of their allegiance. The Federation would not just be a force of power, but a force of compassion. They would lead by example. But the war had left its mark. The former prisoners who had once fought for survival would now dedicate themselves to something greater, ensuring that no one would ever be treated as they had been. They would create an alliance zone built on respect and mutual understanding that would stretch across the galaxy. In time, the Federation would become more than just a military power. They would become a symbol of peace, a force that protected life instead of destroying it, and the galaxy would look to humanity, not as conquerors, but as leaders in a new era of hope. The mistake of killing prisoners of war had been a lesson, one that no one would ever forget, for humanity had learned it from the past, and they would ensure that the future would never repeat it. And so, the galaxy would remember the war's mistakes, the uprisings, the heroes, and how humanity's unyielding will to survive had forged a new beginning, one where mercy was not weakness, but strength. And it was that strength, forged in the crucible of war, that would carry humanity forward, lighting the way for a brighter, more just future. As years passed, the Federation's new doctrine took root, and the galaxy began to change. The once warring factions of the galaxy, having witnessed the rise of a more compassionate humanity, began to reconsider their own paths. The Federation was no longer just a symbol of military might, it became the standard bearer for a new kind of leadership that sought to elevate life rather than extinguish it. But the road to peace was never easy. While the Federation had turned its focus toward diplomacy and reconstruction, not every empire shared the same vision. The remnants of the Galatian Empire had fractured into countless factions, each struggling for control of the old empire's vast territories. Some of these factions, hardened by years of conquest and violence, rejected the Federation's message of peace and compassion. And so, the warlords of the old Galatian territories began to form alliances, not just with each other, but with mercenary groups and rogue states from across the galaxy. They were emboldened by their belief that humanity's power could be broken, that the compassion the Federation now promoted was a weakness that could be exploited. The first skirmish came quietly, an isolated attack on a Federation colony in the distant reaches of the Outer Rim. The raiders, former Galatian soldiers who had turned to piracy, attacked without warning, destroying entire cities and taking hundreds of civilians as prisoners. The Federation responded swiftly, sending a task force to reclaim the colony and secure its citizens. But the Federation wasn't prepared for the brutality of their foes. The pirates had learned it from the past. They knew the Federation's commitment to humanitarian principles, and they planned their attack with that in mind. They took prisoners not to kill them, but to leverage them using humanity's own compassion against them. The human military was forced into a difficult position. Their doctrine of mercy had saved countless lives, but now it threatened to cost them dearly. The raiders demanded a ransom for the prisoners, a ransom that the Federation could not afford to pay without abandoning their values. If they gave in, the pirates would only grow bolder. If they didn't, they risked losing their people. Captain Alara Hayes, now promoted to Admiral, was called to lead the response. She knew the stakes. The Federation's reputation was on the line, and if they didn't act, it would signal to the galaxy that their principles could be easily manipulated. We can't let them turn our own ideals against us, Alara said to her senior officers during the strategy meeting. We've shown the galaxy what we stand for, and we won't back down now, but we can't be reckless either. We'll have to outsmart them, not just outfight them. Alara's plan was to infiltrate the raiders' stronghold and free the prisoners, without negotiating with terrorists. She called upon the veterans, who had fought alongside her in the earlier war, many of them former foes who now stood as pillars of the Federation. These were the ones who understood the true cost of war, and the importance of never sacrificing principles for convenience. Under the cover of darkness, a special operations team led by Commander Darius Holt, now a trusted officer within the Federation's elite forces, infiltrated the pirate base. The operation was swift and brutal. They liberated the prisoners, sabotaged the raiders' communications, and left without a trace. The pirates, stunned by the Federation's resilience, were forced to retreat. The raid was a success, but it was not without consequences. The pirate factions, enraged by their defeat, rallied together, launching a series of retaliatory strikes across the Federation's borders. It became clear that the new peace was fragile, and the Federation was facing an enemy that was both ruthless and determined. But the Federation's resolve had been tested in the fire of war, and it would not break so easily. Over the course of the next few years, the Federation waged a campaign to eliminate the pirate threat once and for all. But this time, it was different. The Federation didn't just rely on their superior firepower. They worked to integrate the former enemies into the fold. Many of the pirates, realizing that the Federation's offer of peace was genuine, began to lay down their arms. Some chose to become allies, even members of the Federation, while others faced justice for their crimes. In time, the Federation emerged victorious, but not in the way most had expected. The warlords were vanquished, the pirates subdued, but the Federation never lost sight of its core principles. Instead of annihilating their enemies, they offered them a chance for redemption. Many took it, and some of the most hardened foes became strong advocates for the Federation's cause. As peace slowly spread throughout the galaxy, humanity's reputation grew. Their strength was not in their weapons, but in their ability to change, to grow, and to forgive. They had learned it from their enemies, and they had learned it from their own mistakes. In the end, the Federation became the cornerstone of a new order in the galaxy, one where no matter the species, no matter the past, everyone had a chance for redemption. And the mistake of killing prisoners of war, it remained a lesson in the hearts and minds of all who remembered it. Humanity had been given the opportunity to show that strength, when tempered with compassion, could lead to a future where all could thrive. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. Years passed since the fracturing of Valis forces, and while peace had settled across much of the galaxy, it was never fully guaranteed. The Federation had grown, not just in strength, but in influence, slowly building alliances with former enemies and neutral factions that had watched the galaxy's transformation with cautious optimism. Yet, despite all the progress, the scars of war lingered, and the remnants of the old guard still had their eyes on humanity's rise. Admiral Alara Hayes, now a respected leader across the galaxy, continued her campaign for peace. The Federation had become a cornerstone for diplomacy, a symbol that strength could coexist with compassion. However, new challenges emerged, one of the most dangerous, coming from the mysterious alien race known as the Inix, a highly advanced species that had long observed humanity's ascent from afar. They had kept their distance, neither fully engaging nor outright attacking, but they had been watching the Federation's every move. The Inix were not a warmongering species, but their civilization was built on absolute control. Their leaders, known as the Council of Shadows, believed in the supremacy of their species and their ability to control the galaxy's order. To them, humanity's insistence on mercy, on offering peace, was a weakness, a flaw in the grand design of cosmic power, and that flaw, as they saw it, could not go unpunished. The first sign of the Inix growing interest in humanity came when their ships appeared along the Federation's borderland, enigmatic and powerful. Their technology far outstripped anything humanity had ever encountered. Their ships could phase in and out of visibility, their weapons capable of rendering entire fleets to dust with a single strike. The Federation had no knowledge of their true intentions, but Alara was not naive. She knew this would test everything humanity had fought for. "We can't afford to make the same mistakes," Alara said during a private council meeting. Her brow furrowed. The holographic map before them displayed the positions of the Inix fleet, hovering at the edge of Federation space. "We've shown the galaxy what we stand for," she continued. "Mercy, peace, and compassion. But we have to be ready. If we try to meet them with the same weakness we fought so hard to overcome, it will be our undoing." The council members were divided. Some argued for preparation and defensive measures, while others believed that diplomacy should be the first course of action. In the midst of this, Commander Darius Holt, now a seasoned strategist, spoke up. His voice was steady but full of determination. "We've faced threats before," he said, "but the Inix are different. They don't want our territory or our resources. They want something much more dangerous. They want to control us, and that means they will never give us the chance to show mercy." Alara nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. The Inix weren't like the pirates, or even the remnant of the Galatian Empire. They saw humanity as an anomaly, something they could either erase or subjugate, and they had no intention of negotiating. "I'll send a delegation," Alara decided. "A small one. No weapons, no threats, just words. But this will be our final chance to avoid conflict. After that, if they refuse peace, we prepare for the worst." And so, a small fleet led by Alara herself, accompanied by representatives from various alien races who had joined the Federation, set out to make contact with the Inix. They arrived at the designated meeting point, a desolate moon orbiting a distant star. It was eerily quiet as their ships docked with the Inix flagship, a dark, monolithic vessel that seemed to blend into the void. Alara and her team were escorted through the cold, sterile halls of the ship, their steps echoing off the metallic floors. They were led to the Council of Shadows, the rulers of the Inix. They stood in stark contrast to the human stall, thin figures wrapped in flowing black robes, their faces hidden behind masks of gleaming obsidian. Admiral Hayes, one of them, spoke, their voice amplified through an eerie distortion. "We have observed your kind for some time. Your rise to power has been impressive, but it is not sustainable. Mercy and compassion are weaknesses, traits that should have been eradicated long ago." Alara met their words with unwavering calm. "We disagree," she said. "We've seen the cost of cruelty. We've learned it from our past. Mercy is not a weakness. It's what allows us to move forward, to build something better. We have nothing to fear from a peaceful coexistence." The Inix Council was silent for a moment. Then, another voice, deeper and colder, spoke from the shadows. "We do not seek coexistence. We seek control. Your ideals are a threat to our order. your kind's willingness to forgive, to show mercy to those who deserve none. It will be the end of the balance we have upheld for millennia. Alara's eyes narrowed, the weight of their words settling over her, but she refused to back down. You may be strong, she said, but strength is not just measured in power or control. It's measured in the ability to stand for what is right, no matter the odds. We've fought and bled for peace, and if you try to take that from us, we will not back down. The Inix leader regarded her for a long moment, his gaze cold and calculating. You mistake our resolve for fear, Admiral Hayes. The galaxy has seen its share of empires rise and fall, but you, human, will learn that peace is an illusion, one that cannot last. With those words, the Inix Council ended the meeting, leaving Alara and her team in silence. It was clear they had not come to negotiate. The Inix would not allow humanity's ideals to survive. Returning to Federation space, Alara gathered her council once more, the weight of the galaxy pressing heavily on her shoulders. It's begun, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Inix will come, and they will not be swayed. We must prepare, not just to defend ourselves, but to stand firm in our ideals. The mistakes of the past of cruelty and conquest must never be allowed to return. Commander Holt stood beside her, his gaze unwavering. We'll fight for that future, Admiral, and we won't back down. And so, as the Inix gathered their forces on the edge of the galaxy, the Federation readied itself for the greatest battle it would ever have seen. At just